Earlier this week, the Supreme Court struck down some of the most draconic anti-abortion policies, the laws of Texas. HB 2 of Texas, which instituted these insane restrictions on abortion with the guise of helping out women, but really just intended to make it almost impossible for women in that state to get an abortion. And that happened. And don't let that fool you into thinking that those who are anti-abortion haven't had a number of legislative and judicial successes over the past few years. It still is, unfortunately, very difficult for many women to get abortions across this country. But it was a good day. And because it was a good day, we can expect the conservatives are going to lose their shit. And they did. And there are any number of examples that I could show you. But I'm going to go to one that I like to reference from time to time. He's a guy who, in watching him, has provided me a great deal of entertainment in a number of different topics. And so we turn to Pat Robertson. What does he think is going to happen as a result of this Supreme Court judgment?
We have slaughtered over 55 million unborn babies in this country, and we're going to pay a terrible price as a nation for allowing that. And when it's sanctioned and approved of it by the highest court in the land, then we all stand responsible for it. And we will pay, all of us as a nation, because the Supreme Court and the president and the leaders of our country have said that's what they want. And those unborn babies are going to be crying out. Their blood will cry out against us as a nation. And one of these days, what's going to happen is going to be horrible. So this is the law. You can talk about the law. It's legal to have an abortion, Roe versus Wade, and so forth. But what is happening is the slaughter of the unborn is exceeding in America the slaughter in any nation I am aware of in the history of mankind.
And we see in Pat Robertson's answer all of the necessary psychology to understand why people hold these religious values both so dear and so intermeshed with their political opinions. Because there is nothing a human wants more than certainty. There's nothing they want more than to know that they're right, and that something bigger than them acknowledges that they're right. Now, many people would say, well, what does the Supreme Court think? That is, after all, the highest court in the land. And if the Supreme Court agrees with you, then that is certainly a good thing for your position. Doesn't mean they're always right. There are any number of cases from Dred Scott all the way to Citizens United, the Supreme Court being wrong. But everybody wants that bigger thing. And for the religious, they have God. And they can simply say, the creator of all things, of this shirt and that camera I'm recording this video on, he agrees with me on such specific policies. And I know it, even though he can't speak to me, has never spoken to me. The last direct words that can be attributed to him, even from my point of view, is thousands of years ago, in books that have been proven both wrong and inconsistent and morally degenerate. But I know that he agrees with me, and I'm right. And it doesn't matter if the country changes. It doesn't matter if the circumstances change. It doesn't matter if the people change. It doesn't matter if the law changes. I will always be right. And so that's one thing. But then we also want revenge. And now, very often, they will follow up a judicial ruling like this, and they will say, okay, they got us this time, but we're going to bounce back, and we're going to lay into them. And there was certainly there was a large amount of that from the right. But Pat Robertson, in this part of the answer at the very least, appears to be betraying a little bit of fear, I think. He has that certainty, the fact that he knows that he's morally right, and yet he's not saying we're going to get them in the next one, or we're going to try to just get a Republican president, he's going to put some more conservative justices on the court. He's saying God is going to punish the U.S. Now, that's a two-part strategy there. It's one, I believe, an admission that they're probably not going to reverse this anytime soon. And he understands that while we've unfortunately squabbled over abortion rights ever since Roe v. Wade, when it seemed pretty clear that you're allowed to have it, that we're moving in the direction of eventually it simply being an established right that laws will protect. And many more laws need to be written to take away some of things like HB 2 and stuff like that. But then, of course, there's the threatening aspect of, I don't even believe that I can convince you that I'm right, so I'm hoping that if I tell you that God is going to wreak havoc across our country, that maybe then you'll just agree with me, even if I haven't made a case for it. And that's pretty much religion and politics throughout history. It's the belief that simply because you hold an opinion and you say that God holds it, you're right and arguments are irrelevant. And then maybe we can get some people who don't pay attention to politics to agree with me because they're afraid that God is going to hit America with earthquakes and tornadoes and hurricanes. And we've had many cases of that, of course. And so, look, the idea that God cares so much about restrictions on admitting privileges in Texas over abortion rights that he's going to remake reality to really stick it to us, that is funny. I think it's, from my point of view as an atheist, the idea that God would be that petty, I think is funny. It's ironic that it's a religious chap who's putting the idea across. But then also, and I don't profess to be an expert on Christianity. I've done enough reading, more than most Christians have, as many atheists have, because we tend to be more interested in research. The idea that God gave us free will, that he wants us to act throughout our life, and then he will judge us based on those things, that's not good enough for most Christians. That if we're doing something that they don't like, it's not enough that we'll burn for all eternity. God's impatient, and he wants to get you before you actually die. And so God is going to try to make life a little bit more hellish, generally for innocence, as he does, because we made abortion legal. This, to me, doesn't make sense. Top to bottom, Christianity seems to make that out to be an evil act, an act not consistent with the rest of what God says or does. But they find it convincing. Pat Robertson finds it convincing, and his aging group of remaining viewers finds it to be interesting as well. I simply insert him here as one representative of the aging wing of Christianity in America.